Shalom, everybody. This is the third class in our Intro to Judaism. I'm Rabbi Alicia Magal of the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley. I welcome you all to this very brief overview of what it is to be Jewish and celebrate as a Jew. This week, we are actually going to concentrate on the sacred seasons with a special focus on Passover. So I hope more people will join us as we start. And if you have signed up for the class, I can also send you the link, but only for those who have signed up for the class. You're special. Okay, let me open up. So there is a whole season, the whole year is filled with holy days. That's where we get the word holiday. It's really holy days. It's sacred, set apart times. And we celebrate in the winter Hanukkah, and then we move over to the spring and we have Passover. And as we go through the seasons, we focus on different aspects of what it is to enjoy the bounty of the earth, what it is to celebrate our history, what it is to develop ourselves and our personality. And each holiday lets us focus in a different way. So let's take a look at some of our holy days. And you may have asked, why is it late or early? Why do we have sometimes Hanukkah almost at Thanksgiving and other times at Christmas time? Why is Passover sometimes earlier in April or later? So this will explain it. As more people are coming on, hi Nancy, I hope Lindsay makes it too. We're going to watch a little video about why is the Jewish calendar different from the regular calendar that you have, what we call the secular calendar. And I don't know why it's not starting. There we go. Can you hear?
Have you ever wondered how the Jewish calendar works and how it came about? The Jewish month begins with a thin crescent. The moon grows until it is full, wanes until it cannot be seen, and eventually reappears. This cycle takes approximately 29.5 days. Since a month needs to consist of complete days, a month in the Jewish calendar is sometimes 29 days, and sometimes 30 days. The solar orbit consists of 365.25 days. The difference between 12 lunar months and the solar year is almost 11 days. The Torah, however, states that Passover must be in springtime. If no adjustment were made, Passover would occur 11 days earlier each year, eventually drifting into winter, then fall, summer, and spring again. The Jewish calendar thus presents two challenges. Who determines whether a month is 29 or 30 days? How can the lunar and solar cycles be coordinated and balanced? In biblical and Mishnaic times, the Sanhedrin was responsible for determining the months and years. On the 30th day of every month, they would cross-examine witnesses who claimed to have seen the new moon. If the witnesses' accounts were corroborated, that day would be declared the first of the month. The previous month was now retroactively determined to have had only 29 days. If no testimony were accepted, the Sanhedrin would declare the following day the first of the new month. In order to balance the solar and lunar cycles, the Sanhedrin periodically inserted an extra month into a year, creating a Shana Mu'uberet, or pregnant year, more commonly known as a leap year. This was the situation until the middle of the 4th century, at which time the Romans forcibly disbanded the Sanhedrin. Hillel II, the last leader of the Sanhedrin and a descendant of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, anticipated this. Therefore, before the Sanhedrin was disbanded, they established a fixed calendar for posterity. The Sanhedrin declared and established all future new months and leap years, granting the fixed calendar the same validity as the original system. To this day, Jews throughout the world use this sophisticated structure created by Rabbi Hillel. Throughout the centuries, the calendar has been one of the backbones of Jewish unity, as it has ensured that Jews the world over celebrate and observe the Jewish holidays on the very same day.
So I hope that helps a little bit, explaining how we had to coordinate a lunar calendar with a solar calendar. So that explains why it slips and slips and slips. We add an extra month, and then things are, let's see, they're late again, then they slip, 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 they get a little bit early, we add a month. And it's always the same date on the lunar calendar. So Rosh Hashanah is always on the 1st of Tishrei, but it might be early September, it might even be early October, which is why your yard sites, if you are going by the Hebrew calendar and you want to have the name of your beloved who passed away read in synagogue, it could be a few weeks earlier or later, and that explains it. But it's always the same date in the Hebrew calendar. So before we go any further, are there any questions about that?
Well,
yes, Nancy.
So other people, the American calendar has a leap year, but we have a leap day every
No, we
year.
have a leap month.
We have a leap month.
Right.
Every
so, 9 times out of 17 years, I think it turns out. But the deal is this: we have to make up so much time. We have a leap month because the 1st is always a new moon, the 15th is always the full moon, and the secular calendar could be any time. That's why we need to add a whole month, and that way it works out. So we're slipping 11 days, 11 days, 11 days till we get close to a month, and we add a whole month. Whereas 364 and a quarter days, only every 4 years, you need a leap day in the secular calendar to catch up. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm amazed at the mathematical prowess it took to create that. Lindsay, you missed the whole idea about a lunar calendar, but you'll make it up when you see the video.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions about how this answers the problem you may have had with Jewish holidays and where they fall on the calendar? Yes, Anne.
And is there anything related to the moon in particular, or the new moon to full moon in the tradition that, is the reason that there's so much emphasis on the moon in this tradition in particular?
If you take yourself back to ancient times, the moon was the greatest clock we had. It was the greatest, most easy time differential that we could have. Everything else was kind of arbitrary. So the moon, we knew, oh, we see the sliver of the moon, that's the new moon. We're working up to the full moon, and then we have the festival. Most of the festivals happen at the full moon. You can sort of get ready. So it just seemed more natural. And there have been so many ways of calculating the times and the seasons. And how many times in history have people started over with year 1? After every revolution, it was year 1. Right now, we go according to the Christian calendar, where we're now in 2023, but the Hebrew calendar is 5,783. And so our history goes back further. The Muslim calendar, somewhere in between, about 3,000 or 4,000 years. And they have a lunar calendar that is not corrected. That's why Ramadan could be any time of the year. It slips and slips and slips. It could be summer or winter or any time. But since we want our holidays to have a seasonal component, So we have to correct to keep the spring ceremony for Passover sometime in the spring. All right, let's look at the whole year now and see what that cycle is. So we are actually in the first month right now, Nisan. And Nisan comes at Passover right here, the first month. That's the time of the having unleavened bread, and we'll spend a lot of time on the symbols of Passover. If you were not in a pure state to celebrate the Passover in ancient times, then you could do it on the full moon of Iyar, called the second Passover, Pesach Sheni. And there really is a kind of ceremony, even now, a month later, where you might eat something with matzah, but you don't have to have kept it up, obviously, more than the week of Passover. Then, counting 7 weeks from the second night of Passover, you come to Shavuot, which just simply means weeks. And that is the giving of Torah. That is the 6th of Sivan. That is when we count the Omer. 7 weeks, 7 times 7 going through the tree of life. If you're in my Torah study or in meditation group, you know that we'll be counting the Omer. And if you want to learn more about how we do this personality check-in to get ourselves purified and ready for receiving Torah, it is online called Counting the Omer, and you can get a daily reminder. So just for that far, Passover to Shavuot, they're connected. And 7 is completion, and 8 is like above completion. That's almost like the mystical moment. So we have 7 days of birth, and the 8th day is circumcision. 7 weeks of counting the Omer, and the 8th is celebrating Shavuot. Very often you have the 7 plus 1, which gets into the mystical realm. This is where we have the early spring harvest, because there are several harvests in the land of Israel. It's a very long growing season, and also the receiving of the 10 Commandments. And so what I've just said went from the agricultural to the mystical in one leap. And you often have that in our holidays, that there's an agricultural basis for celebrating, something in the Bible, something historical, and something that is kind of transcendent and beautiful and mystical. Now you go into the summer, and there is a fast day on Tammuz, but I'm just doing the major ones here. Then you have the 9th of Av. Tisha is 9 of the month of Av, and that's the commemoration of the destruction of the first and the second temple. The Romans knew their history, and it was all done at the same time, kind of to make a point. And all through history, there have been terrible things that happened at this time. It's sort of the low point of the year. We move to Elul, which is a preparation time, moving up to Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year or the head of the turning. And that's the 1st of Elul. And the 1st of Tishrei, the 1st of Tishrei. And then the 10th of Tishrei is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. These are the high holy days. In the 7th month, we read in the Torah, in the 7th month, on the first day, you shall sound the shofar. In the 7th month, on the 10th day, you shall make atonement. And so we've sort of connected these, but they are biblical holidays. 4 days after the end of Yom Kippur, we have Sukkot, which is the harvest holiday in the autumn. This is when everybody would have a great celebration. There was a water ceremony in ancient times, and it's the time of joy. Wouldn't you be joyful if the whole summer was gone and the harvest was in, and you knew that now the rains are going to begin? I mean, that's a real time for celebration. Right after that is Simchat Torah, the joy of starting the Torah all over again. This is where we start with Bereshit, with Genesis. So there are all these new beginnings, you see. And it also goes with the horoscope, with the constellations in the sky. Cheshvan is sometimes called Mar Cheshvan, bitter Cheshvan, because there are no Jewish holidays in this month. No rabbi has ever complained about that. Then Kislev is Hanukkah, and that's a very late holiday. It's not biblical. It's already at the time of the Maccabees, celebrating overcoming the Greek sort of oppression and establishing for some time, again, an independent Israeli, what you could call a Judean independent country and nation. And Hanukkah means dedication because they rededicated the temple after it had been destroyed and just messed up, what can I say, by the Greeks who used the Syrians as their kind of local army. So moving into winter, this is the darkest time of the year. We bring light at Hanukkah, and most religions, most cultures have something about bringing light in the darkness. So that's what we do. We move into Tevet and into Shvat, which is Tu B'Shvat, means the 15th of Shvat. That's when we do planting. That's when the sap starts to rise in the trees. We have a celebration of eating all kinds of fruits. It's just a beautiful holiday. We plant here at the synagogue. And as we move forward into spring, we've got Purim, which is kind of like March Madness. It's in Adar. Adar is basically Pisces. It's the end of the cycle. And this is where we put in the extra month so we can have Adar 2. So this is, sometimes you have Adar and then another Adar before you get to Nisan. Sometimes there's 1 month between Purim and Passover. Sometimes there are 2 months. So those are the holy times and the seasons. And as you look at these and you consider, I could have shown you a diagram that also showed the horoscope, because the ancients were very aware of the energies of each month as the sun and the moon were moving, and this is for the northern hemisphere. Now, in the southern hemisphere, when they have Hanukkah, it's their summer, which always kind of freaked me out and seemed very strange, but they got used to it because they'll say, in the land of Israel, this is the rainy season. In the land of Israel, this is the planting time. And they know that they've got it back, they've got it, well, for us backwards, but it makes sense in the southern hemisphere for them. Questions about the cycle of seasons and holidays? Anything that comes up or comments you want to make when you actually look at the chart? So if I tested you tomorrow, you get it all right. Okay. All right, let's look. Oh, Nancy, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I just in the last couple of years I learned that Tish B'Av is the equivalent to Valentine's Day, and I'm always very intrigued by how Valentine's Day, Tish B'Av, Purim, Halloween, Hanukkah, Christmas. There seems to be Passover, Easter. There seems to be a lot of that.
There are some correlations. I think you mean Tu B'Shvat and not Tisha B'Av, because that's a fast day and it's a very sad day. There is Tu B'Av.
Tu B'Av, that's the one I mixed up.
Okay, Tu B'Av is the 15th of Av, and just a few days after the 9th, yeah, there's this kind of dancing in the fields of the young maidens in white borrowed dresses, and it's a time to find your match. It's kind of like the app that they had for dating. Also after Yom Kippur, they
When is that?
15th of Av. The 15th of Av, Tu B'Av.
So it's right near Tish B'Av.
Yeah, it's 4 days later. Oh no, 6.
Okay, got it.
I add 9 and 6 is 15. Okay, so it's almost a week later. Thank you for that. Lindsay, let me unmute you. I can't. You have to. There, go.
Just wondering, so what holidays are considered the high holidays?
The high holidays that we call high holidays is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and you could include Sukkot. It's that whole season in the fall where you make atonement, where you get ready for a new year, where you ask for forgiveness, you offer forgiveness, and you wipe the slate clean. And in our day, we call it the High Holy Days. But in the ancient times, it was Sukkot because it was an agricultural society, and they called that Hehag, the holiday. So once we became more of an urban people and we were dispersed all over the world, the coming together at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we were less, that was more of significance because many of us were not landed and didn't have harvests. So that kind of changed the emphasis.
I see. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions? Yes, Sybil.
Well, I was gonna say, in a sense, though, there also are two harvest festivals because you have a summer harvest and a winter harvest.
Correct. The first
There's some-
fruits, the
yeah,
first
there's some-
fruits, the bikurim, the first fruits at Shavuot, and then the final harvest of the grains in at Sukkot.
Right, which is something different because we have winter here is not a growing season, but winter is a growing season in Israel.
No, the fall is the end of the growing season, and the winter is the time when the rains fall, but it's not a growing
Right, but
season.
what I meant was the winter rains bring you food in this your
Right.
spring is a spring. Your spring harvest is from the winter rains.
Correct.
No.
And we'll change our liturgy next week after Passover. We won't say in our Amidah, our standing prayer, we will switch from blessed is God who brings down the rain and the wind. We'll change it to blessed is God who brings the dew, because there's a dry season in Israel and a wet season, and they are very distinct. And it's the same in Los Angeles, which is why a lot of Israelis feel really at home in Los Angeles, because the desert's on the right, the sea is on the left, the mountains are in the north, and it doesn't rain in the summer. So when we came to Sedona, this totally freaked out my husband when we had monsoon. And he said, but it's summer, how can you have rain? He had never experienced that before. So just want to say that there are different places in different parts of the world. So let's look at the pilgrimage festivals. These are the biblical holidays that are mentioned in the Torah. Passover in the spring, which we are about to celebrate this next Wednesday night. And that's all about freedom. It's about the Exodus. It's about coming out of slavery to the wilderness. And it's also the Feast of Unleavened Bread, where you clean out all your shelves and your drawers. And if anybody wants to sell your chametz, which is anything with leavening, I've done it for myself and for the synagogue, and I'll do it for any of you personally, and you can ask me offline how you do that. Shavuot is in the early summer. That's when you bring the first fruits, called bikurim. And this is when I just love it because we put flowers in our hair and we dance. And it's one of my favorite holidays. And the kibbutz, oh my goodness, they go from branch to branch to show off their products, including the plastics factory, including the bananas, including the children. They say, these are our first fruits too. They sort of take it to a very sweet way of expressing it. And Shavuot is also another level where we receive the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. So it's a very layered holiday. It's where we read the book of Ruth. It's just a beautiful holiday that has many layers that were added so that it made sense in whatever land you lived, in whatever age you lived. So we've got the agricultural, the historical, and the mystical in all these holidays. Sukkot is the fall harvest. That is the end of the High Holy Day time, and it's a time of praying for rain, and that's after Sukkot the rains start. And there are all kinds of wonderful ceremonies that we do, like with willow branches on right at the end, the very end of Sukkot, we beat the willow branches to make a sound, which is called theurgic. We're saying, you hear the sound? Yeah, we want rain, we want rain. And it's not only do we a prayer for rain, but we actually have an action that like primes the pump. So the other holidays were added or came later or were combined, but these are called the pilgrimage festivals. And those of you who may be interested in conversion, this is often one of the final questions when you are tested. What are the pilgrimage festivals? So please pay attention to this. Passover, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. If you grew up in a Yiddish-speaking home, it would be Shavuos and Sukkot, like Shabbos and Shabbat, but that's the Hebrew that I've given you. Question, let me stop share. Yes.
Those 3 holidays are harvest holidays. It doesn't seem to me that it makes sense that they be I know that they are, and I know I'm missing something. Why would they be
Okay. Pilgrimage means that you had to give a special sacrifice in Jerusalem, and they would come from all over, and they would camp out in Jerusalem, and come to the temple and bring first fruits, bring a sacrifice, in the ancient times when the priesthood still was there and the temple stood, this was a pilgrimage holiday because you would actually come by foot. Holchei regel, regalim, it's called foot in Hebrew because they would come from all over.
But isn't that a bad like that's when you're supposed to be harvesting? Isn't it like inconvenient to make a pilgrimage to Yerushalayim when you're supposed to be harvesting?
No, it's right after the harvest. The harvest is in. That would make no sense. You're absolutely right. Everything's in, and you're celebrating. You go, okay, time to celebrate. I won't give another word. Okay, now all of these holidays are marvelous, but they come once a month. Rosh Chodesh is new moon. Once a year for most of the holidays. But what's the holiday that trumps all the other holidays? It comes the most often. Let's hear. Shabbat. Absolutely. So I thought for our blessing this week, because I promised Nancy I'd offer a blessing every week, the blessing for lighting candles. And the reason this is a really good one for you to learn is because it's the same for the holidays. You just change Ner Shel Shabbat, candle of Shabbat, to Ner Shel Yom Tov. To Yom is good. Yom Tov means good day, holiday. Yontiv in Yiddish. That's where they get Yontiv is Yom Tov. So we're going to say the blessing, and this is one that you should all. Oh, I see. There's a mistake here because of something that I did. Okay, let me just wait for 1 second while I repair it. I took it out of edit mode, and it did something funny to the spelling. So think about how you feel when you light candles. It's such a wonderful feeling. I just need to, well, there will be the mistake. I can't change it because I realized I took a screenshot. Okay, never mind. Here it is in Hebrew, which is correct. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. So there shouldn't be this extra new here, okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat or shel Yom Tov. And there's slight differences sometimes. And if it's on Shabbat and a holiday, you say Shabbat vit shel Yom Tov. And we like to add this 3-part blessing or wish in our synagogue. May we be blessed with Shabbat holiness. May we be blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. Sometimes we say Shabbat light. So this is something that is really worthy of learning. I will actually fix it after this class, but important to learn the mitzvah blessings. This is the formula. Blessed are you, God, ruling over time and space. You could say king of the world, but I like to degenderize it and say ruling over time and space. who has commanded us with commandments, mitzvot. Mitzvotav means his commandments, and commanded us, or let us make a holy connection. And in this case, it's lahadlik, to light the candle of Shabbat, lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. But all of the mitzvah blessings start like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. What did you command us? And then you add the commandment to wave the lulav, to oh golly, can't think of them all right now, but every mitzvah blessing, and there are many, starts that way, and then you just add the tagline of what the mitzvah is. To hear the Megillah, to, you know, whatever it is, you start this way. So it's very good for you to learn that. Now we're focusing on Passover because that's coming up next week. How do we learn about the Passover? It's the Exodus story. When we read in the book of Exodus about Moses and going to Pharaoh and being slaves and coming out and crossing the sea to the wilderness, that is the basis of the Seder. It's a retelling and reliving individually and communally the journey from oppression to freedom. And the Haggadah is the most illustrated of our holy text. This is just one page. Looks like the Sheikh Haggadah, I think. Looks very beautiful. And this is a mem, manishtana halayla hazeh. This is the child asking the 4 questions. There is always a symbolic Seder plate. There's a Haggadah, which means the telling. There's a beautiful table setting. And this is a very modern one because there's an orange on the Seder plate. That's a pretty new invention the last like 25 years. For marginalized people, for women on the bima, for anyone who feels outside the community, for gays and lesbians. There are various stories about how that got to be, but in any case, it has sweet sections and it's juicy. And the message there is that we all form part of the juicy whole of community. So let's look at how we taste our history through symbolic foods. Here's a traditional Seder plate. You have bitter herbs, which either is like a bitter lettuce leaf or it's horseradish in our day, something that's bitter. And that is the bitterness of slavery. We have charoset, which is in Europe, it's an apple, nut, and wine mixture. But in the Middle East, like where my husband comes from, it's with dates. Now in Europe, they didn't have dates, so they substituted apples. And if you see the date walnut wine mixture, it really is like mortar and it could hold bricks together. And that's because when the Israelites were slaves, they would build Pharaoh's cities and they had to make bricks, and they did it out of like, you know, sand and kind of like the ancient cement. And so we make it sweet, but it sort of looks like that mortar. We have parsley, and that symbolizes spring and hope and new growth, because this is Nisan. This is the month of spring. But we dip it in salt water, which isn't shown here, for the tears that we shed in slavery. It also makes it taste better. What can I say? Then there's a lamb bone. For vegetarians, they'll use a beet, because this represents several things. One is the lamb sacrifice of that first Exodus, where they had to put blood on the doorpost so that the angel of death would pass over the houses of the Jews when the firstborn of the Egyptians was slain. It also represents the mighty arm of the Holy One who brought us out with a mighty arm. That's the lamb bone. There's a roasted egg. And that represents the festival sacrifice. For every festival, there was always a sacrifice. So on Passover, there were like 2. There was the lamb, and there was at every festival, there was a sacrifice. So here we have like 2 that suggest that. And the matzah is the bread of affliction, but you know it's 2-sided. And so it's also the bread of hope and freedom, because we don't have any leavened bread or products. Now here you have some horseradish that has been sort of cut with beets. You can do that with apple. And we often have slices of horseradish for the brave of heart, or this kind of horseradish, because we want to have a taste of matzah with charoset and horseradish. We have the bitter and the sweet, and it's called the Hillel sandwich. This picture is matzah shmura, guarded matzah, and it's pretty much done by hand, and it's baked in individually in under 18 minutes. The stuff you're used to seeing in the store is square, and it's industrially created and baked, and it's got the consistency of like cardboard, basically. But it's an acquired taste. And if you ever had matzah brie for breakfast, it's sort of like French toast made with matzah. It's delicious. Any questions about the symbols on the Seder plate? So when my kids got to be teenagers, you know, they knew all this. They were very blasé about it. So I said, okay, this year, I think they were 16. I said, all right, you and your friends, because we had a lot of friends that we were inviting, I'd like you to put on this other tray, on this alternative Seder plate, a symbol of freedom for you. So I gave them 5 minutes, and they sort of scattered around the house, figured out what they wanted, came back, and it was amazing because one of our son's friends put keys on the plate and said, "This is my freedom. I've just gotten my license and I can drive now." Do you get it? That was freedom for a 16-year-old. So I like to ask people, what would you add to the Seder plate that represents an ideal of freedom for you? Or it could be the opposite. It could be something bitter that you want to let go of and that you want to mention. But I like to focus on the freedom. So let's hear some of your alternative symbols that you might add. Madeline.
A plane ticket.
A plane ticket, especially after COVID,
Travel.
the fact that you could travel. Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago at our Seder, which we did on Zoom, I put my vaccination card.
Mm.
So there are different years where different things mean freedom. Very good. What else? Any other ideas, or have you heard of any other symbols that have gone on Seder plates? Yes, Diane.
For me, it's being outside in nature, having the sunshine, a little bit of a breeze, like a warm breeze, and the plants are growing.
You might
And
just take a flower from your garden, put it right on the plate. It took sunshine and rain and all that to make the flower, and you like being outside. You usually have flowery things behind you. So a flower, isn't that marvelous? Symbol of freedom, absolutely.
Sure.
I know that some people put an olive on the plate for peace in the Middle East, like an olive branch. Lindsay, what's yours?
Mine would be spring water, because we've had a drought in in Northern California so bad. So we've had abundant water. And so,
We
yeah,
did have floods.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's great. We have snowpack and it's beautiful. So yeah, water.
So spring water, beautiful. See that? And there are other years where that wouldn't come to your mind, but this year it absolutely did. If somebody recently got out of a very difficult relationship, there might be some divorce decree on that plate. You know, you just don't know. Whatever symbolizes freedom, it's nice to make it concrete and mention it. Why do I say this? Because usually it represents a journey from a tight place of restriction to an open place of freedom and choice, which is the archetype of the Exodus story. So you're supposed to talk about this at the Seder.
The generational setback of children in this country, because
You're supposed to talk about what is your story, what is your Exodus. One year we asked my mother, who's a Holocaust survivor, to tell something about her liberation, the whole story of when she was liberated and how she came to America and how we came to be and that whole miracle. So these are themes that we want to teach midor lador, from generation to generation. And so we involve the children, and that's one of the most important things we can do. We involve children so we teach them a story. How do we do it? Do we lecture them? No. We get them involved. We say, okay, you need to ask the 4 questions. And believe me, children 5 years old know this. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they are experts. And they start singing, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. That's a more modern one. The old one was Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Shebechol halelot anu aklim chametz matzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah. But I use the more modern one. And I got to tell you a story. My brother is 4 years younger. So I wanted to hold on to the fact that I knew the 4 questions for just a couple more years until he took over. So this was my ploy. I said, there are 4 questions. Why don't you do the first 2 and I'll do the last 2 because they're harder. So he agreed. The next year I said, listen, we sing a lot. Why don't I harmonize with you and we'll sing the whole 4 questions in harmony? So I held on to that still a couple more years, just I was the older sister and I didn't want to give it up. And I don't know if he ever caught on because I'll ask him this year because he's in his 70s now. But he was the younger brother and he then took over and that was his task. Now, when my mother lived in Florida, one year she did kind of like a senior Seder and she was in her 70s and she was the youngest at her table and she sang the 4 questions. So everything's relative. But my grandchildren, who are now 8, they sang the 4 questions when they were 4 here at our Seder. And remember that? Whoever was here, they grabbed the mic and they were a little shy and they stood next to me and but they got a lot of applause, so they were very happy. Now, the whole Haggadah takes a while to tell the story, and there's songs and there's tasting and it takes about an hour. How do you keep the kids involved? Well, you tell them, listen, kids, there's going to be a hunt. You break open one piece of the matzah. We're going to hide it during the meal, and you're the ones who have to find it, and you'll get a prize. Or sometimes they bargain. They're different family traditions. And boy, do they stay awake. They want to go hunting for that afikomen because you can't go on with the Seder until you have that afikomen, which actually it means in Greek dessert. And after that, when they had the Roman big feasts, they would continue on their festival. We don't. We stop after the afikomen. And it keeps them interested and awake. It's like a treasure hunt. And sometimes we make envelopes that they decorate that say afikoman. So it's not a Hebrew word, it's a Greek word. Any memories about searching for the afikoman or telling the 4 questions or anything like that from your own life? We'd love to share that because it's sometimes different from family to family. Let's hear some of your stories. I know you have stories. Yes, Nancy.
Way to teach you, it's a good way to teach you how to be the second citizen, because when you're the big sister, like I was a big sister, I did not like not being the one reading and you have to learn how to deal with it. And I think that that's sometimes the first taste that you have as a little girl. I think little boys maybe hit each other, but little girls, like, and that's your first taste of, zip it so your baby sister could.
Let the little one have it. Yeah, it's a big deal. They practice for weeks before the Seder, and I've just sent a box. It's called Days, Days, and you sign up like as a parent or grandparent, And Diane is nodding. And you pay for a box to be sent to your grandchildren that's age appropriate. And when they open it up, there's crafts and there's recipes and there's books and there's something that you build and for each of the holidays. And it's so great. I love it. And they always wait for it to come. And I started it when they were a little too young and they would just sort of go through it. They didn't really understand how, but now they really, they can read and they really treasure it. So that's how we can be good grandparents. Any other questions about the Haggadah itself, the 14 steps of how you go from dipping and tasting and telling the story? It's called the Seder because that means order. And even if you have a very truncated one, you'll still go through all of those parts. The fun part afterwards is I'll find it and I'll send it to you, Days. Let me just see. So I'll find that at the end of the class. There's the fun part where you open your door for Elijah, and Elijah comes to every single Seder and must get very drunk because he's got to drink from Elijah's cup at every single Seder. And I don't know how it is, but when you look in that cup, it always seems to go down somehow during the meal. And we sing Eliyahu Hanavi. Why Elijah? Various reasons. Elijah comes at liminal times, like at a circumcision when the baby is just about to be circumcised. There's a seed of Elijah. Saturday night, when that liminal moment when Shabbat is leaving and we're starting the week, we sing Eliyahu Hanavi. Elijah comes. Here at the Seder, we're coming out of slavery to freedom. Elijah comes, and also because Elijah settles arguments. And there are actually 5 promises in the Bible where it says, I'll bring you out of slavery, bring you out of the land. I'll make you a free people and I'll be your God. And you know, and there are all these 5 promises. And we have a cup of wine for each of the promises. I just have a sip, but there are 4 times that we pick up the cup, lean to the left like free people, take a sip, say the blessing, and we weren't sure if we actually had fulfilled the 5th. Are we actually free people in our own land, worshiping God? Is it all as it should be? And they didn't know if it really had been settled. So they said, you know what, in the time to come, Elijah will settle that. So Elijah gets that 5th cup. Now, there's a lot of modern commentaries, so many different kinds of Haggadot. I have a stack like this. I have so many illustrated and contemporary, and a woman's Haggadah and a freedom Haggadah, and it's just incredible. There's a half-hour Haggadah that you can download. And the truth is that it's all about asking questions, and it's all about feeling that you yourself came out and are now in a new state of being. And if you can do that, then there are many ways to do it. It's really my favorite holiday. And so in some Jewish homes, when everything else goes, Passover is one time they still get together and they still do some kind of a Passover. Yes, Carol.
So why is leaning left? Why does that symbolize freedom?
So when we were slaves, we ate in a hurry and maybe didn't even sit down, gulp, 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 go back to work. But the Roman banquets were on divans, or however you say it, and they would be reclining. And most of us are right-handed, so we lean to the left so we can drink. For left-handed people, I imagine they would do it this way, to lean on their right because of where they're picking up the cup. But it has to do with being, remember the Seder was created by the rabbis in the 1st century, and it was modeled after a Roman banquet, but made Jewish. So, and with a mystical number 4 questions, 4 cups of wine, 4 children, traditionally 4 sons, but 4 is a mystical number that comes up again and again. And so they added a layer that made it very Jewish, but it was based on what they saw with the idea of a sumptuous banquet of the upper class that reclined during the meal. That's the reason. And that's sometimes I used to make crafts with pillowcases, and the kids would draw on it, and it would be nice, and we'd stuff a little pillow, and everybody had a pillow that they would lean on. Yes, Nancy, let me unmute you. Go.
It's law that you have to have 4 glasses of wine, right? You know, like you're supposed to really drink a lot on this holiday and be very, you know, am I right about that?
Yes, obviously, if you have a problem with alcohol, you drink grape juice. Grape juice is okay, but it's a symbol of joy, and there's a certain amount of matzah you're supposed to have, a certain amount of wine you're supposed to have. I cannot say that I have that much. We also have the little cups of wine, our little silver cups, and that one I can handle because it's like a sip each. It's not a big goblet. So that Kiddush cup, I wish I had a picture of it here. There's a Kiddush cup with 6 little ones that was a traditional Polish silver set that my mother had, and it's the only thing we have from her home. It was buried in the ground during the war. A cousin dug it up, sent it to us, and we used it every single Shabbat and holiday since then. And then when my daughter got married, and it's in my book, that page, when she got married, I gave her the big cup and did I give her 4 small ones or 2 small ones? I think 2 small ones. And so the twins drink from that. And when they came to our house and they saw ours, they said, "Oh, we have the same ones at our house." Very sweet, very precious to me. And I remember once I was asked, if you had to grab something precious and leave your house immediately, what would you take? And it was those Kiddush cups. Everything else could be replaced. That couldn't. So anything about your Passover, anything about what you know you're going to be doing, or you have questions about how to do it, or what kind of Haggadah to use, and this is the time to ask questions about that. All right, you can also ask me offline. So this is the point I want to make, that the festivals, these holy days, have a basis in the land, in agriculture, something about Israel, growing, harvesting, something about nature, planting, noticing the first blossoms. We're very grounded. I mean, we were farmers and shepherds. So the holidays are based in that. They also have a historical aspect. I could call it a biblical aspect, something that tells the story of our people. And some of them very early, some of them are later. The latest one would be Purim. The Purim story is already under the Persians, which is like 3rd century BCE. It's one of the latest, and it's post-biblical. And Hanukkah is before that. So we have later holidays. We also have modern holidays like Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Israel Independence Day that we'll be celebrating in different ways. But we're talking here about the traditional holidays that were like pre-World War II. They all have symbols, like the Hanukkah menorah at Hanukkah. They all have foods. Potato pancakes for Hanukkah, cheesecake for Shavuot. You know, every holiday has its foods, so we sort of eat through the year. Or we fast, you know, it's feasting or fasting. And so connecting to the most basic human thing we do is eat. So we want to connect that memory of foods and smells and preparations with the story. We also have songs, and especially if you grow up in Israel, my goodness, my husband has hundreds of songs for every holiday. And in America, we have some of them in Hebrew, some of them in English, some of them adapted, but definitely there are songs. And Passover has many, many, many songs. We sing about Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, we were slaves and now we're free. And then we have the children's songs like Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, let my people go, that whole song. And then what does he answer? No, 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 I will not let them go. 3-year-olds just love this. There are songs that are more modern and complex and beautiful. They're children's songs, but when you sing, you're remembering the history better. You're remembering the whatever it's teaching better because it's got a melody, and it also talks to the heart. And customs, like we play dreidel at Hanukkah, which teaches about Nes Gadol Hayasham, a great miracle happened there. We have customs of cleaning out the shelves and not having leavening at Passover. We wear white and no leather on Yom Kippur. Each of them has a custom. And they're different in Sephardic homes, in Ashkenazi homes. They're different. They're sometimes different in different communities or different families. But it sticks with you and you say, when I was a child, I remember my grandfather, ... fill in the blank. And that kind of nostalgia, you want to hand on. You want to keep some of those customs. Grating the horseradish. I mean, I'm sure you've got memories of somebody lighting candles or making gefilte fish, or I could go on for ages. On each holiday, there are different customs, but each of the holidays has that level. And they also have spiritual teachings and applications to our lives. So since Passover is coming, I wanted to bring to you the possibility of considering how in your life did you release yourself or help someone else get released from a tight, oppressive place to a wide open place of wilderness where you just didn't know all the answers, but you knew that you had more choices and that you were heading on some journey toward what you could call the promised land. So when you have the historical view of the Israelites in the desert, marching, getting to Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments, dealing with all they dealt with for 40 years and getting to the promised land, how is that played out in your life? What was the oppression? What's the wilderness? What did you leave? What did it take to move you to leave? And what is the aspect of freedom? Diane.
I lived in Illinois, and in the winter we had black ice and sleet and terrible, terrible weather. Driving in black ice was very frightening. The promised land was Arizona. Of course, this winter we can't talk about it, but the sunshine and the warmth, and I found my people in the synagogue. And for me, the synagogue and Arizona were my promised land. From the horrible, terrible darkness. I was just talking to my son in Illinois. He said it's dark. It was dark the whole winter. They hardly had any sun at all. So that was darkness for me.
And there's the plague of darkness right there. Oh yeah, the plagues. We didn't talk about the plagues and how here's a teaching. We get to the plagues, the 10 plagues. Frogs and lice and all the moving up to darkness and the slaying of the firstborn. We have all of these plagues, and who did it happen to? It happened to the Egyptians, who were the oppressors in the story. But do we jump around and dance and clap? No, we dip our finger into the wine, which is a symbol of joy, and we reduce a drop. With every plague, we drop a drop of the grape juice or the wine onto our plates as we're saying Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Arov, and we say it in Hebrew or English or both, but the idea is that we shouldn't feel joy and express joy when even our enemies are killed or hurt or destroyed. And that's very hard for humans because we always root for our team, right? So there's a midrash that the angels saw the Israelites crossing and going, yay. And God said to them, what are you cheering for? My children are dying, because the Egyptians are also God's people. So that midrash led to this custom of withdrawing and not gloating over the fall of our enemies. Hard to do as humans, but that's one of the lessons of the Seder. Other comments? Yes, Nancy.
I was going to say that I think that you're giving, or at least in my family that I love very much, you're giving too much credit, because we didn't say you shouldn't be gloating. We'd say, okay, here are the plagues. Let's do the plagues. Let's strip our, let's put our finger in the water and put it in our plate. That's what we've always done. We didn't understand that we're reducing the joy. I think that explanation is really a good one. We're reducing the joy, because that was a terrible thing to happen to an enemy. And if it happens to an enemy, it's on some level also happening to you. So you have to understand the importance of what this is that we're doing. And I think every aspect of the Seder is so loaded with symbolism. But unfortunately, in these, half an hour seders, or 5-minute seders, or people they ate all day and then they can't wait to eat more. They don't really talk about what these things really are.
Right.
And
so I insist in our Seder that you don't have small talk, that you have big talk, so that during dinner you talk about something that really matters. And once a year you can have a longer time and do a whole Seder and come back after the meal for Elijah and the singing and all that. That we certainly are going to do that at our community Seder here on the 5th of April at 5:30. And study what goes into it. There's a scholar's Haggadah. There's so many wonderful commentaries. There's a night of questions. That's a beautiful Haggadah. I have maybe 20 different kinds of Haggadahs, and if you want to come over and look through them, I can show them to you. There's a children's Haggadahs that my mother really liked, because it was big pictures and very few words, and you could go through kind of quickly. She liked that one. You have to know your people. If you've got little kids, you do it with jumping frogs. I still have a frog here somewhere. Here's a froggy from one of the Seders, and so I'm going to be doing a Seder in a local school, a high school, and I have brought posters of all the different characters, and they're going to hold them up as I narrate. And the Jewish people came, and there was Moses, and there was the Pharaoh, and there was pyramids, and they'll really get into it. So you have to know your audience. And if you have a bunch of scholars, you're going to have a different kind of Seder. If you have people who sing, like our Seder always was a singing Seder. If you have older kids, you have to challenge them. And it is a time of reflection, of learning, and of handing down what's important to you from generation to generation. It's like the ethical will of our people, really. Now, I know that there are 4 children. There's the wise. They used to be called the wicked. I call it the alienated. The simple, and the one who doesn't even know how to ask. But there's so much commentary on that you could turn it all around and really talk about, is it really the wise child that wants to know all the rules and laws? Isn't that just rote spitting back what you've been learning? What about that alienated child that says, what does this mean to you? Isn't that a great question? Tell them what it means to you. Turn them around, make them feel included. And is there something marvelous about the simple child that just says, oh, what's going on here? And just really is open to learning. And the one who doesn't even know how to ask, well, that might be the mystical meditator. They're not asking questions, they're just taking it all in. So while traditionally, there's a hierarchy of these so-called 4 sons, going from the one who doesn't know how to ask to the simple, to the wicked, to the wise. I've turned it on its head, And I think there's something marvelous about all of them. And we've all passed through all of those stages. And once you get to the quote, wise child, where you know all the rules and you know all the laws, turn it around and get to be the one who doesn't even know how to ask because they're just in that mystical space of, how do you like that? Always something new,
Like it.
always something new in the Seder. I'd love to hear from people who haven't spoken about what you expect if you're going to a Seder, what you hope for, because we have a big time off now in this class. When we come back April 25th, that is when I'm going to ask you, for those of you who went to a Seder, how was it? What did you learn? What did you bring from this class that made it different? And we'll also talk about modern holidays because it's going to fall on Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering fallen soldiers in Israel. And I'll talk about the modern holidays, and we'll also talk about counting the Omer at that class in April. But before we go, we have time for discussion about anything on your mind about holidays or specifically Passover, especially if you haven't raised your hand so far. I'd love to hear from you. Janet, Sybil, Carol, Sandra, somebody?
Yeah, what are the eggs
Oh,
represent?
the hard-boiled, the roasted egg, that symbolizes the festival sacrifice. There was always a sacrifice brought at every holiday. And if you came to Torah study, if you remember, I showed you a whole chart about all the sacrifices, the burnt offerings, the meal offerings, all those different offerings. There was a festival offering that people brought, and that's symbolized by the roasted egg in our time.
And then is it just on that plate or?
It's just on the plate, and a lot of people have the custom of having a lot of hard-boiled eggs and everybody takes one. Some people dip it in salt water. We've decided to have a half an egg because there's so much else to eat.
Okay. Because I did get invited and my role is to bring 18 eggs, hard-boiled eggs.
Got it. So they'll have
hard-boiled.
one, and if you want to make it look roasted, there are two ways to do it. One is to roast it, but very often if you actually put it in under the broiler, it'll pop. Or you can boil it and put tea and or onion skins in it. It'll get nice mottled brown. But you don't have to do that for the 18, just for the one on the Seder plate. That's a good trick. I like that one. Any other questions about could you use this, could you use that? For vegan, instead of an egg, they use an avocado pit because it also symbolizes new life. Sort of like at Easter, it's also rebirth, new life, spring. That's part of it too, besides the sacrifice. So it's nice to know the substitutions if you need to. Anyone else?
I love the spinning of the four people, and it could open up a discussion about accepting others and what do you see in others and labeling people and all of that. And it's just
great idea. Like we have at the Women's Seder, we have outrageous for the four daughters. And it's pretty funny. You have to come to the Women's Seder on the 11th to see that. But there are many ways to, as you say, spin it, reinterpret it, and re-identify as opposed to judge. So glad you brought that up. That is really good. I got a little chill just then, so I know it's true. Yes, Madeline.
Bitter herbs are that you use? I missed that.
Bitter herbs are like the bitterness of slavery. So we're
right, but what are they?
Well, romaine lettuce starts off as sweet and then it turns a little bitter. Or you can actually use slices of horseradish, or you can grate the horseradish, but wear goggles, and then add beets or apple to cut it so you can take a big glop because otherwise it's just too sharp. And it'll clean out your sinuses for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I use a processor, but I used to grate it. Yes, Carol.
I just want to share a short, funny story. Our younger son is having Seder at his house, in Colorado when I said, so what do you remember about the Seders that we had? And they were always at our best friend's house. And he said, well, we 4 kids knew that Elijah was not drinking that cup of wine that started out full that ended empty. We knew it was Frank, who's our dearest friend. And he said, and we tried everything to catch Frank pretending he was Elijah. We videotaped, we took pictures, we never caught Frank drinking the wine. And
See,
so
what a great
like,
memory.
it's just another interesting thing is to ask your kids, what was your experience?
Right.
Right?
But you know, Elijah really came. This is our version of Santa Claus coming down the chimney. You know, yes, there is an Elijah. Very good. Yes, Nancy, and then Sybil. Hold on, let me unmute you. Go ahead.
Only we believe that the adults believe that Elijah came. The adults don't believe in Santa Claus. I mean, I think Elijah is more like interesting to adults.
There you go. And Elijah never died, so that's why we think that. By the way, there are 4 children, but there's a tradition of talking about the 5th child. The 5th child is the one who's not at the table, the one who didn't come. I'm trying to bring him back. Okay, Sybil?
Well, I was just going to mention that you mentioned the Women's Seder, and we have a couple of lovely customs at Women's Seder that are not at traditional Seder, which is the Miriam's cup, which is a cup of water. And what we do is everyone has water, and we pour, instead of taking the wine out of Elijah's cup, we pour water into the Miriam's cup. And it's all about, Miriam was the person who found water for the Israelites as they wandered through the desert. So it's a very nice custom.
Thank you for bringing that up, Sybil. Yes, Miriam's cup, we decorated them. We have them in glass. We spent a lot of time on that in our women's group, our Chabura, and it harkens back to the mystical story of how Miriam was the one who could always find a sweet water well as the Israelites were going through the desert and there was such a lack of water. And there's a song that Debbie Friedman wrote about the women and the water and the well. It's a really cool song. We do a lot of singing at the Women's Seder, by the way. Yes, Steve.
Yes, I made a notation that the avocado pit represents the egg for people who are vegan. What do you do with the avocado pit?
You put it instead of an egg. In other words, the Seder plate, it just symbolizes growth and spring, and it looks like an egg and it's round, and that's what they decided to do.
You can always plant it, Steve.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you could always plant it and then be very disappointed. I didn't realize that you had Linda there. I'm just going to put Steve. Here we go.
Yeah.
Change. There we go.
I don't have video on my computer.
Okay. Singing, dancing, planting, reading. There's something for everybody in our holidays, from the youngest to the oldest, from the ones who are least scholarly to the ones who've been studying their whole lives. These holidays are time out to reassess who we are and to bolster our identity. So I love holidays. I love the idea that the children learn through games and songs and foods, and that it's a gentle and pleasant way to hand down tradition from generation to generation. So whether this is your first time hearing about Passover or you've done it for all the time since you were a baby, I hope there was something in today that pleased you and elevated your understanding of Jewish holidays. Thank you all. I'll see you on April 25th for the last of this class, at which point I want to know what you would like to study. I'll tell you more about holidays and more about modern day celebrations and Israel and counting the Omer, but I wondered if there's something else you would like me to prepare for that last class. So this is free for all brainstorming. Any suggestions? I will go in any direction you want. You can also write me during the week. So think about what you'd like. Yes, Janet.
Well, and I don't know that it's or more of a question. So when I was young growing up, if you would have asked me what a Reform temple is, I would say that they speak English. I wouldn't say that today. So I don't know, was that the case? And so I had asked it before, like what was the difference between the Reform and, you know, renewal and reconstructionist? But has there been a move within that Reform movement to input a lot more Hebrew in their services?
Definitely.
As compared to the past?
Oh, I have it
And
downstairs.
why?
But the Union Prayer Book was like this, and the Mishkan Tefillah is like this. So yes, it used to be the Shema was in Hebrew, maybe Ve'ahavta, and maybe Kaddish, and that was called classical reform. And they've since added that you can wear a talit and a kippah. They did not used to wear that. Only the rabbi and the cantor, and they've really, really brought back a lot of ritual and a lot of Hebrew and practice in the Reform movement. And the conservative has added the possibility of women being ordained. They've sort of softened. So it's really interesting how the movements have sort of merged and in response to what their people needed over the years. Definitely different from the 50s and 60s, what we might have remembered from childhood. Good question. Yes, much more Reform, much more Hebrew. Yes, Steve.
Yes, Linda and I were talking about the origins of the Hebrew language and the written language, and I'd like to discuss where that came from, or how it came about.
I'm going to give you an answer you did not expect.
Okay.
The Hebrew alphabet are the building blocks of creation, and each of the letters has a weight and a resonance and a power and a numerical value that led to the whole study of gematria, which is like numerology, and the mystical layer of a holy language. That is a much better answer than if I tell you in what century it would develop from Proto-Sinaitic and from pictographs into an alphabet. So that's the one I'm going to tell you today. Yes, Lindsay.
I'm also really interested in that. I'm starting to learn Hebrew and the gematria. I think that's so interesting, and the vibration of the Hebrew and how it was, and how the names were given based on the vibration of each thing.
Well, let me show you something that I have on my bulletin board, and this is the Yud He Vav He, which is the four-letter holy name of God, which each of the months has a different permutation based on the energy of that month. And there is a book, B'nai Yisachar, named after one of the tribes that knows the times and the seasons, but there's no limit to the depths you can go with letters, permutations, energies, and it's not just sound like our alphabet. And you know where that comes from? Aleph, Bet, the first two letters of the Hebrew language, through alpha, beta, through the Greek, to alphabet in English. Okay, I'll do something with the Hebrew language. Yes, Sybil.
Well, I was going to say there scientifically, it's fascinating that the frequency of there's certain frequencies that if they're toned, they will create the alphabet. In sand, like in sand or whatever, you can actually they're part of the frequency of the universe. They really are, from a scientific perspective.
I love the way you said that, part of the frequency of the universe. Hold on to that. That's beautifully said. Lindsay.
Yeah, so that is another thing. It's maybe a little too in depth for the beginning course, but something that I would love to get more connection with is the Dr. Morisot's. They did the flash freezing of the molecules of water.
Right.
Have you seen those the
I
sacred
have that.
geometry?
Study
Yeah,
that
so
on your own and keep going because it's fascinating, but it's beyond the purview of this particular study.
right. And so my thought is the blessings in Hebrew, seeing the different vibrations that come up with that would be a fascinating thing to just know who's doing that, and if they've tried to do the study with the water being blessed by prayers in Hebrew.
Interesting. I believe probably somebody did. So, okay, so in the fourth class, we're going to talk about the tree of life, the Sephirot in Kabbalah, and counting the Omer. But by then we'll be already quite into it. So come to my Torah study. And if you ask Patty Hoish, she'll give you the wonderful calendar that we'll be handing out for Torah study. And that shows each day what are the meditation, what is the quality of the day and the quality of the week to be studied. I saw another hand somewhere. Okay, Nancy.
I think that there have been Russian studies on that they measured food before people said the bracha, after people said the appropriate bracha for the food, and supposedly the frequency it's measured by this Russian. I didn't know if you had heard of it.
Well,
But
I like the idea because what you're doing is you're elevating the sparks and you are taking something that could be just an animal act of just eating because you're hungry, and you're raising it up to a holy act by offering a blessing before and after you eat. So be blessed, everybody, and love this class. And I look forward to having a beautiful Passover and then talking about it afterwards and other holidays and something about Kabbalah at April 25th. Shalom, everyone.
Yeah.
Oh.